We're going to get started with our program today. I want to first introduce Tamika Wong, who's the Executive Director of the Chinese Historical Society, and she will be walking us through the rest of the program today. And if you have, I'm sorry, let me backtrack. If you look at your program inside, you'll see that we also have some feedback forms. If you could please fill those out throughout the program, and at the end give it to a Chinese Historical Society staff member so that we can continue having these kinds of programs. We'd very much welcome them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Monica. Okay, so I'm Tamika Wong. I am the Executive Director for the Chinese Historical Society of America, and I wanted to say thank you for coming today. We're really honored that you've taken your time to be here with us. There's so many people here in this room who have served and who are the descendants of people who have served, including myself, and I'm very proud that we're gathered here to remember and to share our experiences. I wanted to tell you a little bit about Chinese Historical Society of America. We are the oldest historical organization dedicated to the preservation and interpretation of Chinese American history. And this is important because we're here in what is arguably the capital of Chinese America. Here in San Francisco, we have a long history. There are many people who connect to the stories of the railroads. There are people who connect to the stories, that have come after. And I do think that it's really great that we're gathered here right in San Francisco in Chinatown. We are here to talk about the contributions of Chinese Americans to World War II in the United States and abroad, and the ways in which war has helped shape the trajectories of Chinese Americans after the war. So it's really an encompassing view, just as we did yesterday, where we talked about people who were on the home front. We're trying to give a holistic view of what the experience has been like. And Monty Hahn was kind enough to even to share, what it's currently like as a spouse of somebody serving in the military. People have made, like we honored today, the ultimate sacrifice. Many people, even while people are serving, are making many sacrifices to move around the country, to be there at home while their person is away overseas on, serving our country. So I think it is very important for us to recognize that. I'd like to make a special thank you to the Chinese American Citizens Alliance. They are here to help people if you need assistance with getting your Congressional Medal of Honor from the government. So I do hope that you will work on that. I myself actually found a photo of my grandfather, and I heard that is enough documentation for me to get his medal, which is wonderful to learn. I did want to also give a thanks to California Humanities, Cal Humanities, for being the nonprofit sponsor and partner for this. They are the nonprofit partner, of the National Endowment of the Humanities, for the humanities. And without their support, we would not have been able to do all the work that we've been able to do. At the same time, I'll make my pitch here. Chinese Historical Society is a relatively small organization. Right now, we have about 7 staff, and soon to be fewer, unfortunately. But we're doing work that I think is important, that is timely and is critical. So I hope that you will consider joining us as members, like us on Facebook, tell people that you were here. We need to let people know that we exist so that they can connect with us, they can know where to find these stories, know who's helping to collect these stories, even if we can't collect all of your artifacts, because our largest artifact is our building, the historic YWCA building here in Chinatown on 965 Clay, but we don't have unlimited space. And, in talking to many people here today, we need to figure out how do we train up more citizen historians, more people who can help ask the questions of their families, ask the questions, write down their own memories, because basically there's 5 million Chinese in America. My staff, even if I grew to 20 people, would not be able to capture the breadth and depth of our experience, the Chinese American experience. So I really encourage you to support us in what we're trying to do, and also to do the work that you need to do for yourselves, for your families, and for your communities. One thing I have a few housekeeping notes for everyone. Please turn off your cell phones. This is a good time to make sure you've got that covered. If you need park and ride stamps, we have those available from any of our staff. They can direct you to where to find those. I did want to let you know that there's bathrooms down here, down the stairs, there's signage, and if you need an ADA bathroom, they're upstairs in the gift shop. So that, unfortunately, that's up the hill on Grant Street. Next, I would like to do our show and tell of World War I and World War II artifacts. And I'm going to ask the people whose artifacts are up here to please share. And we're going to start with Major General Bill Chen. If you can come up. Thank you.
Okay, this has been a great 2 days here. I'd like to mention to you that I recently wrote this article. The article is entitled Story Arc of Chinese American World War II Veterans. And of course, next month we celebrate Veterans Day. So I specifically timed the publishing of this article for Veterans Day. If you'd like a copy of this, please contact Monica or Pam Wong, and they can send you an electronic copy. Now, Tamika mentioned that San Francisco is the capital for Chinese Americans, right? And so I'd like to mention that in my article, I highlight San Francisco veterans of World War II because I talk about a number of veterans. One, of course, is Colonel John Young, father of Connie and Vic. And some of you may know a Moon Chin aviator he flew the hump for CNAC, so he's mentioned here. He was actually a civilian pilot for CNAC, but because of all the hump flights that CNAC did for the Air Transport Command, he was recognized, and they were recognized as veterans. And so, again, if you'd like a copy of this, you can get an electronic copy through CHSA. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So next, I will ask James Hewen. Thank you so much for being here with us.
And I'm very proud to be here today to share my story and my father's story with you. I am a Navy veteran, very proud of that. You can see I'm the only one wearing a Navy cap. Anyway, this story of the Chinese nationals joining the U.S. Navy in China, primarily Hong Kong and Shanghai, is very unknown. And that's why I brought this up. My father was born in 1910 in Yinping County, which is part of the Seiyep district next to Huiping and Kaiping and Toisan. So he joined the Navy in 1932 at the age of 22. And how come the Navy accepted him? Well, when I was a child growing up, I said after college I'm going to find out why. So I joined the U.S. Navy and I researched it. So in 1932, he joined mainly for the money, $21 a month, which is 80 cents a day. But American dollars was powerful. That found out that was equivalent to a middle-class Chinese in Hong Kong. So he joined, and the Navy, I think, was short of mess cooks aboard a ship. As you know, the officers are segregated from the enlisted personnel. And the white sailors did not want to do that kind of work. So the Navy allowed the Chinese to join in China, and also the Filipinos in the Philippines. So he was in there, and there's a great silver lining to World War II. He was still in the Navy when Pearl Harbor started, and I was born 8 months before Pearl Harbor, April 1941. So the Navy left China a few months before Pearl Harbor, and they fled to Australia. And from there, my father served on many ships of the Pacific Theater. And he made a E-7 CPO steward right after the war. And 3 months after the end of the war, he got his U.S. citizenship. And he never showed me these papers until after he passed away. I have a copy of his citizenship certificate, and he got in on a Navy ship in Shanghai, China. Prior to that, he had never come to the U.S. before. So after we became American citizens, and we know that Mao Zedong was going to win China, the Navy said, you can either go back to Hong Kong or come to the U.S. Well, now that he has 5 children, guess what my mother decided to do? Come to the U.S., and we settled in Berkeley. He was still on active duty and was stationed in San Diego. And my 2 sons, my 2 brothers were starting high school, found out that UC Berkeley was the best college in the entire country, and it's pretty much free. So he asked for a transfer to San Francisco, and of course we got there. Well, guess what? So I collected all these pictures, and guess what? In 1965, about 10 or more years after World War II, I graduated from college in 1965 from San Jose State with a degree in chemistry. And guess what? The Vietnam War was starting, and the Army was going to draft me. So what did I do? Of course, I joined the Navy. So I was a Navy Supply Corps officer 3 months after I graduated from college. And I'm very proud to say that Rear Admiral John Yuan is also the Supply Corps Commandant. He's a big honcho, two-star admiral, and in 1965, it was unheard of any minority officers to be a flag rank. So I served as a Supply Corps officer. Because of my eyesight, I can become a line officer to command destroyers. So I was on a repair ship, and now I was in charge of stewards, and now I know exactly what they did. So it's a great 3.5 years experience. So after I retired from Lockheed Martin, I visited about 20 families and collected these photographs from them. And I asked them to help me write up our story. And unfortunately, my generation, I don't know why there's a Chinese thing about we don't want it to be discovered. We don't want to share our history. I said, look at all the Asian studies in UC Berkeley, Stanford, SF State, all over the country. Why not? Well, that's their, sadly to say that they couldn't get much cooperation except for these photographs. And here we have 99 people celebrating a red egg and ginger party for Nina Dong, who also settled in Berkeley. Most of these are Navy veterans. They've all got this citizenship. And we have former POWs from USS Houston and POWs in the Philippines, and 2-star admirals honoring them on a ship. And of course, our mothers who were separated from their fathers, no money, no food, didn't even know whether they were alive or where they were. So when my father came back, I was only 8 months old when he left. I didn't know who he was. I was about 6 years old. And here's a chief serving on a gunboat, USS Guam, about in the 1930s. And my family here, and another family, they also served during the Korean War also. In fact, my father, when he made 20 years, that was 1952, he could have retired, but the Navy said, you cannot retire. Your force will serve 2 more years. Anyway, that's a story of the Navy in China and the Chinese stewards that were there. The real nice thing is that all of them all made E7 was a chief petty officer steward, and they lived happily ever after with full pension and health benefits.
So next up, we're going to invite Connie Young-Yu to speak.
It was quite a moment to have the rededication with all of you there. It certainly had an entirely different feeling, of course, than what I expected. It was very, very personal, and it was very meaningful. And even though it wasn't like a crowd of thousands like in 1951, we know we have documentation, and we could bring it further. Because I thought that other generations, other people will need to know this story, and it will be documented. Thank you for all of you taking pictures. People will be asking you for pictures. So speaking of pictures, my father, because he was commander of American Legion, launching the project, and also he was called to active duty during the Korean War, and so he was able to help arrange a wonderful program inviting the 6th Army Marching Band and his friend General Whittemire, General Albert Whittemire from the Presidio, who brought a contingent of soldiers, and made it a very, very grand moment, grand patriotic spectacle. And also, it was something for Chinatown. It was just really probably the first time there was anything like that in Chinatown. This was before the Southwest Chinese New Year parade. So you can imagine what this was like, having a parade down, it looks like it was down on California Street. I'll just take out some of these pictures. And then I'd like you to come look at them later. So you can, oh, okay, yes. Okay, this is a picture of the parade. I guess it looks like it's on California Street. There's some tracks, right? The parade in 1951, you know, these are the veterans, the VFW and American Legion, and look, they look so triumphant. It's a wonderful photograph, and we would like, you know, American Legion Post today to have copies of it, you know. So and here's the keynote address done by General Albert Whittemire, and you can look at it closely later. My father had notes. He kept a note of everybody who was on the committee. So people can say, you know, well, I was on the committee, and if it's not penciled in here, you weren't on the committee. So, and here's a photograph of the American Legion, you know. So on the committee, there were several women. There's a whole group of women. Catherine Toy, this is funny, Mrs. Spencer Ao Yang, no first name, darn it. Mrs. John Young, that's my mother. Her name is Mary. And then Lai Lee is on the committee. That's your dad, you know, Creighton's father, Lai Lee. So he was part of this. Oh, all these people like Lim P. Lee. The post office is named after Lim P. Lee. He was very active in the American Legion and very important in this project. And Shaw Pang, originally from Mississippi, Charles Leung. Well, you just take a look. You know, I have it out here. And then a photograph. Now, this is the original unveiling of the monument. You could take a look at it. And it was by a woman, a member of the Legion, whose relatives were in World War II. And you could see that there's that lattice that I mentioned. It was made out of wood because this was during the Korean War. They decided not to ask for copper because, you know, copper was a very important element, you know, used in the war. And they decided we're going to make it in wood until the time was right to have it in copper. And that was done in 1956. There was another dedication when St. Mary's Square was being refurbished, and there's a parking garage, and a beautiful lattice work was you know, in copper, was replacing the wood. And this was designed by Worley K. Wong, an architect who is a descendant of Lim Lit Hong, a railroad worker who's very well documented, a railroad worker on the Central Pacific. So his descendants. So when General Chin wrote an article about from railroad worker to flying tiger, it was like, you know, it's in the genes. You know, these workers who came to build the Transcontinental had the right stuff, and they passed it on. So it's very moving. And also Lai Lee was a descendant of a railroad worker as well, and a veteran. So let's see. I have pictures of the salute. This is small, but I just want to mention who was saluting at the, of course, that's James Hall, and you have a picture of him. He was a commander of the American Legion, and there's Patrick Sun, the Consul General from China. And then Elmer Robinson, Mayor of San Francisco. And there is General Whittemire. And then on the right side is Lim P. Lee. So they were the ones at the front, and you could see the band. And I think my father was about to step up to give his address. Okay. And then it was quite a big deal for the Gungsaw, and you know what Gungsaw are, all the organizations in Chinatown. So General Whittemire had to pay respects to the Chinese 6 companies, and there he is. And there's my dad, and there's Joseph Kwan of the American Legion. I think he might have been commander at that time. And then some officials from China. And here's a photograph of the big crowd. And I had this photograph. I mean, my father had it. I mean, he's kept all these photographs. I'm so lucky to have his collection. And some historians had never seen this. And somebody writing a book on San Francisco Chinatown came by to ask for photographs. And I showed her this photograph, and she goes, "What's that?" And I said, all those people at St. Mary's Square. And I said, that is the dedication of the War Memorial to the fallen Chinese Americans in World War I and World War II who made the ultimate sacrifice. And, you know, under the shadow of the statue of Sun Yat-sen, which was made by the famous sculptor Buffano. And you could see how splendid it really was. I'd like you to take a look later. So, okay, I think. And then, okay, I have other, maybe, okay, a couple more. Okay, well, there's my father's dedication speech, which my brother read. He kept a copy of this. And then there's a parade. Okay, do we have time? Okay, we have to hurry. Okay, the other things that I just wanted to mention, you can just look, and there's an invitation that was given out to people for the second dedication. There's Chinese press. And then here's the color picture. Okay, this is the big one to show, okay, if you don't mind. Okay, so that's the full page, which has all these photographs, and you can just see what a great day it was for San Francisco. And I don't say just for Chinatown, but for San Francisco. And on the table are some memorabilia from my father. My father served in World War II in CBI, and he was at the Battle of Shongsan. He was actually in the traveling unit that trained Chinese troops to use ammunition. You know, he was in the ordnance maintenance. He was all over China, 3 provinces of China. And it all ended up in this huge battle, the Battle of Shongsan, which freed the Burma Road. It was a mountain where the Japanese were on top of the mountain, and they had a stranglehold on the Burma Road, so no supplies could get into China. And this had gone on for a couple years, and Chinese troops had stormed the mountain. They'd be just shot down. It was such carnage, and my father saw all that. And he and Captain Peter Hopkins were the 2 engineers that devised the system that exploded the mountain with 6,000 pounds of TNT from the United States. And that blew up the top of the mountain. The Japanese did not surrender, but they came down. They never surrender. And this is one of the fans that every Japanese soldier carried. And my father also has a flag. It's not a captured flag. It was found on the body of a Japanese soldier. So this was after the battle, and my father never spoke about it in glorious terms, that it was just done. And these are 2 daggers that are ceremonial daggers that were given to my father from units of the Chinese army in gratitude. And this one has the Chinese words. Are they on this one? Okay. This is from a famous Chinese poem that said, essentially, never surrender, never surrender. And you have to have ultimate victory even if you have to sacrifice. So that's the theme. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Connie. We really appreciate it. I think this really just points out how how many rich stories, how many diverse stories that we have to tell. Luckily, Connie and her family have, all these wonderful artifacts, all this great documentation. So thank you for sharing that today. I did want to call up Monty Hom, we're also going to be sharing his film and having a question and answer with Randall Ching after that. So because of time, I'm going to ask Monty to come up, maybe do 3 minutes with this. I'm going to put you on timer, and then we're going to move on to the other. And because I think also a few people in the audience want to say a few words about their families.
So just to make sure, I know Connie didn't have a chance to say this, but Sergeant Lau Sing Ki, his bust that I put together today, Connie, his granddaughter has a portrait that was given to CHSA, I believe, is that correct? And then the medals that are there are recent medals from New York State that has the, it's inscribed with the figure of Lau Sing Ki being the color guard, and how he became sergeant was after he came home with the 77th Division, right? He actually was given that rank, and they skipped over a rank or two to give him that honorary title as sergeant of the color guard. So part of that is, of course, the other bust, as I mentioned earlier, is the look of our Ranger veteran, Randall Ching with the 5th Rangers from Normandy, who's here with us for the first time. So I think it's important that people kind of see in the flesh how these guys look like in combat in the battlefield, and that's what they wore, and that was their equipment. So you go from 1918 to 1944, pretty big advancement, kind of. So, and the last thing I also wanted to say was my uncle who inspired me. A lot of people ask me, how did he come to join the paratroops? Well, he lied to his mother, because he was actually in the Army already in 1940. So when the draft came, he volunteered and enlisted because he didn't really want to be drafted. So he was actually an MP stationed on Angel Island. It was interesting. This is pre-Pearl Harbor. When Pearl Harbor happened, the unit got called back, and he was on Angel Island. And one afternoon, 2 paratroop officers walked into the cafeteria and said, "We're looking for volunteers for jump school, jump training. And so anyone's interested, please step right here and sign up." So he had this friend who's Caucasian. They said, "Okay, we'll go." So by the time they went up there, he left, and my uncle was the only one left. And he said, and the sergeant said, "So you want to enlist?" He goes, yes. And the sergeant goes, "Okay, so don't forget, you get $50 extra jump pay for hazardous duty." And so he saw that $50 like, whoa, it's $21 plus 50. That's a lot of money for mom. So he lied to his mother, and when his mother asked him, "Well, what are you going to be doing?" He said, "I'm working on airplanes." Okay, except that what did he do? He jumped out of airplanes to fight, right? So he never told mom that. So when he got wounded at Normandy and the telegrams came back, wow, the family was pretty devastated because they weren't sure he was going to survive. My uncle was hit D+3, which is 3 days after D-Day, at a town called Lafayette. And that was the big battle that you saw that was sort of fictitiously shown in Saving Private Ryan, where they were holding a bridge and they were fighting a lot of German armored vehicles trying to hold that town. So he got hit right under the rim of his helmet, right in his left temple, and it took him out of the war. But he lived, of course, to tell me about it, and I have all his stuff. And actually, I bought his book today of memorabilia, so if anyone wants to take a look at that, I'll be sure to share it, okay?
Thank you so much, Monty. Monty Hom. So I regret that Commander Helen Wong had to leave, and we are a little bit behind in our program. And I really regret it, especially because she is the very first female commander of the post. But we have Roger Dong, who's going to talk a little bit about the update for the
update. Okay, there's a great update coming on, but we want to talk about Catholic Post. Okay, well, the update about Catholic Post is that we wouldn't be here today except for the World War I veterans who really stuck together, hung together, and in the late 1920s banded together to form the first American Legion post, because at the time even our veterans were not really welcomed in the American Legion. So that happened, and that's the beginning of great history. Today, American Legion Post has about 130 members. We are one of the most active posts in the nation. For the last 6 years, our post has come out #1 among 12,000 posts for a great newsletter that we publish. And anybody interested, we'll be happy to email that to you. And Helen was our first female. I'd like to tell the story, ask a quick question, some really remarkable news in the Fortune magazine this past month. What is the most common feature of management of Lockheed Martin?
Female CEO.
But that's really amazing because there was an article that I was ready to publish in the American Legion Post letter, but they thought it was too sexist because, you go back a few years, you can probably name one female CEO among the American major corporations. But today, AT&T, Chinese female CEO, IBM, Lockheed Martin, Boeing Defense, Fidelity, Home Depot, Walmart. The common feature is they're all female CEOs. And you think about it, a few years there wasn't one. And so I want to mention that. It's not related, but I think it's such an unusual opportunity. It's women's chance to screw up. We've messed it up for so long. Pass the ball. Anyway, well, our Legion is making a lot of progress. We've been able to recruit some young people. One of the biggest problems with the senior organization I belong to is that we're all Medicare. And we've got a half a dozen new members who are not on Medicare, so maybe we'll survive another 10 years. And my time is up, but we have anybody who's a veteran who would like to come visit our post, second Saturday of every month at 11 o'clock, 1524 Powell Street. Always welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm going to switch things up a little bit because we are behind, and I want to make sure that we don't lose General Bill Chen. So I'm going to ask him to come and talk about the Chinese American Citizens Alliance Congressional Gold Medal update. And this is something I think we've mentioned several times today and also yesterday, but we really do want to make sure everybody who should be getting these medals gets them. So thank you.
Okay, I'm going to be joined by Ed Gore, but what I'd like to do, if you'll direct your attention to the slides, I'm going to give an update on the Congressional Gold Medal. For those of you that were not at the symposium, this is a recap of the major contributions of our World War II veterans. I won't go over any of the detail except they demonstrated their skills, competencies, and loyalties. They volunteered or were drafted during the time when the Chinese Exclusion Act was still in being. It wasn't repealed until December of 1943. But most of all, it's the contributions that they made in letting the American people know the capabilities of Chinese Americans here in the United States and what they did in terms of enabling us to enjoy the American dream. Next chart. So, what I'd like to emphasize is that the Congressional Gold Medal is the highest award that is given by Congress. What I'll do is to give an update of the gold medal design and then the ceremonies that are planned for the spring of 2020. Next chart. What's shown on the left are what was characteristic of our Chinese American veterans. Our Chinese American veterans predominantly were integrated into the United States Armed Forces. They were in all branches of the service, and so in the coin design we will reflect that. And it'll be reflected through images of members of Army, Army Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, and Merchant Marine, And in addition, to represent Chinese American women, we will have a nurse as a representative of the Chinese American women that served in our armed forces. They served on land, air, and sea, so we will have representations of that, of a ship, of an airplane, and of course, if you all had a vote, you would probably vote for the P-40 Flying Tiger aircraft, and that's what we have in the design. The other main aspect, of course, were our veterans served with pride. They served with pride as Americans, and so that'll be an inscription on the coin. Okay, next chart. Okay, the presiding of the official award will be done by the Speaker of the House. Now, we can't control the calendar of the Speaker of the House because as we look at her busy schedule, it'll have to fit in with her schedule. And we want that presentation hopefully in the spring of 2020. That same evening, we will have a celebration in a hotel with reception, dinner, and that's when we will present the CGM to our veterans who are living that will be there, or to their next of kin who will be the recipients of the Congressional Gold Medal. And so for all of you that have your fathers or relatives who are recipients, you'll be offered an opportunity to attend that Washington ceremony and then participate in the reception and dinner that follows. If you're not able to attend, then there will be regional celebrations in all the major cities, and certainly San Francisco will have a large number of recipients. Next chart. Now, the registration process is actually very simple. We have a website, www.caww2.org. You can go to that. There's a wealth of information on the website that ranges from registration to a list of the approved veterans, and so once the registrations have been verified, then they will come on the approved list, which is broken out by branch of service. So I would encourage, if you have friends, family, relatives, if they have veterans that qualify, please register. Okay, let me open it up to questions and answers, and Ed, if you'd like to say a few words, please do.
Nothing like trying to kick the general off the stage here to get a promotion, right? Let me give you a little inspiration here. This is not our medal, but this is similar to the one we'll be presenting to veterans and their families. It is the same size. It'll be the same weight. It's not gold. Yeah, I knew. But I'm going to pass this around so everyone can at least take a look at it. This is the Filipino medal that was done for them. You'll look at the front and the back. Ours will be similar in terms of the size and all, but as General Chin has said, it will reflect all of those elements that he talked about the design. Let me just say what a pleasure, honor, and privilege it is to be among all of you. I'm a civilian. My dad was a World War II veteran, as was my father-in-law, but I say that we all will agree that the reason we're here in America is because we are working off the backs of every one of those who served in the military. There is no question about that. I only say that a lot. I really say that because I have friends who were in Vietnam during the time that I was in school, so I always thank them, the ones, especially the guys that didn't make it back, that I knew, that I was able to go to school and do the things I was able to do, experience of freedom. So let me tell you one thing about the application process that General Chin talked about. I have seen some wonderful exciting, heart-moving, tear-wrenching stories that you folks have written about your veteran online. I don't know exactly what eventually we're going to do with all these wonderful stories, but I can tell you, if you take a minute to read any of them, they just really reflect why when Tamika and CHSA have done Call to Rise, I'm going to give every one of you here a challenge to register and say, this is your call to duty, to find the veteran families who have not registered, to make an effort. It takes time, it takes work. But I will say this, if our veterans have gone to the work, effort, sacrifice to serve our military for 2, 4, 10, 20 years of service, the least we can do is take time to find them all. Not just the ones that we're related to or the ones that we know down the street, but anyone that you may have contact with over your influence and clubs you belong to, churches you go to do that. And this is the only way we'll find them. Most of them are not on social media, you know that. And even the children of the veterans are 60s and 70 years old, so half may be on, half may not be. You have to go back to the old school method of door-to-door, go to churches, go to events where you may find veteran families there. So this is my call to you, is to get out there and find them. And thanks Chinese Historical Society of America for being part of this effort as well with CACA. Thank you. And Bill, you want to have any questions? That's awesome.
Actually, I would like for us to hold the questions to ask individually, if it's okay. If you guys are going to be available for questions, that'd be wonderful. We are running short on time, so we're going to be showing the film, and we were hoping to have a very short Q&A with Monty Hom, the filmmaker, and also with Randall Ching. And let's see, I wanted, though, to use this time while we're setting up to ask just how many people here are interested in sharing a very brief something, show and tell. Can I just have a show of hands if you wanted a little bit of time? Okay, 3 minutes, 1 minute each after this is done, and then we'll spend the rest on Q&A. Okay, here we go. Let's have Roger Dong and Al Young and Victor Lim to come up and do your 1 minute.
I didn't find out much about my dad until after he died. He died in 1995, and we was going through his papers, and we discovered that my father, a small little guy, 5'4", did something really amazing. Because he was good in math, the Army Air Corps put him in charge of maintaining all the B-25 bombers in Arizona, which Doolittle used to bomb Tokyo. And that was something he never told me. I was in the Air Force. But after he died, we found that out in his papers.
A little bit of humor. This comes from the 1951 Cathay Post newsletter. And it reads, membership and message. Comrades, it is an honor to belong to the American Legion, for it is the most exclusive organization. Its membership button is an emblem of tried and tested citizenship. It identifies the wearer as one who's discharged with the honor of the highest obligation of citizenship, bearing of arms in times of war in defense of America. No child can be born into it. No emperor, king, or potentate can command its submission. No act of Congress or legislature can qualify one for membership. Neither wealth nor influence can buy a membership. There is no better universal passport to friendship in the United States than the current American Legion membership card. So, to all you comrades who have neglected to pay your 1952 dues, it is time to act. Bring yours in today. Joe S. Kwan, membership chairman.
Yes. And then I'm going to ask Victor Lim to come on up and share your 1 minute.
I have some pictures that we dug up from the family archives. Matter of fact, I found one of just yesterday. But I had my uncles, 2 uncles, and my dad served in the World War II. I found a picture yesterday that was my uncle Quing. We knew he was a navigator, but didn't realize that he had flown 25 missions out of Guadalcanal. And I have a picture that inscribed Guadalcanal, August 1943. They secured the air base about February 43. So he was flying B-24s all over the South Pacific. Another uncle was a flight surgeon, and he landed before MacArthur at the Philippines. So he was there, forced to go to the beach and watch MacArthur walk off his landing craft 5 times to get enough footage. My dad had told me that my dad was a pilot. He graduated from college in the 41, and but he wanted to be a pilot. He had gone to ROTC. He had learned to fly, but his one problem was he's Chinese. So he told me as a youngster that he just lied on his application, put that he was Caucasian. And years later, after he passed away, I found these yearbooks from flight school in 42, and you'll see these books. You can look at them later. There'll be 150 blonde-haired cadets, one Chinese guy. It was my dad. So he was supposed to fly to North Africa on a bomber flight, but they ended up putting him to teach the cadets that Ann Lee was talking about that came from China. So the 1,000 cadets, so he spent the war teaching them that. So when I connected with Ann, I had books that she was showing that had pictures of the cadets that came over. She had no pictures. I had pictures, and she went crazy. So we've been best friends for the last 2 months because of what I have. Anyway, you can look at any time.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing, Vic. So I think we've got the technical difficulties under control. We are going to show the film and have a very brief Q&A afterwards because unfortunately we are running out of time.
So this is just the sneak preview of what's to come for next year. This is our opening trailer.
First, I want to give Monty Hom a round of applause. Thank you so much. What I want to say about this is, of course, it's great that you're showing it as a film, but I want to say thank you, for recognizing the importance of this and actually making the contacts with these various veterans and their families because they've entrusted to you their stories and many of their artifacts and mementos, and I think that you're really helping to keep these stories alive, and, that is to be commended for sure. So thank you so much.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Tamika. Sorry about the technical difficulties, but this is just a little preview of our new remastered version that's coming for next year, and the final film will be over an hour. And this just gives you a little bit of a preview from what we started 20 years ago when I introduced the film in DC. We were at the President's office, at the Oval Office, with actually all the families of the veterans. We were invited by the White House to basically meet and greet President Clinton. And it was a pretty momentous occasion because it was the first time that an American president acknowledged the service of Chinese American servicemen and women. So it was a really awesome event. We premiered at the Smithsonian 2 days later. And basically for 20 years, I have thought about redoing this film to a point where we need to remaster this and we need to include new material. So I'm happy to say that we have a lot of veterans that we were able to put into this new version, including Randall Ching, as you saw. And every time I watch this interview, you have to understand, Mr. Ching has never talked about his Ranger experience for 9 decades, right? Living in Chinatown. Never talked about his combat experiences with anybody. So to hear him talk about how the Rangers were trained to be cold-blooded killers, I'm shaking all the time. How he had to endure the type of combat he went through, and the fact that many of his comrades were killed along the way. To this day, I often wonder, how does an individual live through all of that? As with all of our veterans who have gone through those traumatic situations, including today. So for the film, I want everyone to understand that this is definitely a very, very, well, a singular piece of work, and it should be the definitive piece of work for our community and our history of World War II. So hopefully, in the coming months, if anyone has ideas or anything, I'd love to hear from you, because we still have time to put new material into the new version that will be shown next year. And we hope to come back to San Francisco sometime next year with a big bash, and we're going to throw a big party, and we're going to have a big premiere for this film. And all the veterans here deserve it. And I just want to say thank you again for watching the trailer for the first time. Sorry, I can take a few questions, right? Okay. I think the momentous thing was to really have the family support me. Thank you very much, Bonnie, Carl, Norma, Sylvia, everyone. I mean, it was pretty incredible for you guys to take me in. And I felt that Randall was a bit like my uncle. You know, we immediately connected. I guess I speak the same lingo that he did in World War II, because I understood everything he was telling me. And I just want you to know, Randall, that a member of the younger generation is going to take this forward to make sure that your story, as well as all of our other veterans of World War II, are not going to be forgotten. And it was an honor, such an honor to work with you on that. I wanted to also say that it was really important because Randall witnessed something very important for the Rangers. On June 6, 1944, the Rangers were having a really hard time moving inland because the enemy fire was so intense on Omaha Beach, they couldn't move. So all the elements of the 29th Division and other Army units were stuck. There was a general there, if anyone has seen the old film, The Longest Day, played by Robert Mitchum. He was there playing General Norman Cota. And he was getting sick and tired of the situation because the guys were pinned down on the beach and dying. So he said, okay, guys, we got to move in. Why don't we just move in and die? We're dying at the beach. What happened to be Randall was really close by to him, including a bunch of other Rangers. And so General Cota looked over and said, what unit you guys with? He said, we're with the Rangers, sir. And he said, well, goddamn it, Rangers, lead the way. So that model today, Rangers lead the way, is from that moment that Randall witnessed. And Randall is the only witness left from that day of that momentous moment. And because of the situation, General Norman Cota is also being upgraded for a Medal of Honor. So Randall is coming out in his age, being the military activist, to provide his statement, to talk about how he witnessed that particular momentous occasion of how he was able to lead the charge and move the troops inland from that moment on. Rangers lead the way. Thank you, Randall. If there's any questions, let's grab a few questions before we have to close out here. So quiet. Thank you. Well, the story of Randall is really unique. Growing up in Chinatown, you know, he basically, as many of you grew up in the 30s, you understand how Chinatown was like during the Depression. We did pretty good. We did okay here. I don't think the Depression hit us as hard as the other parts of the country. But there was a really interesting situation with Randall. He didn't stay here. His whole entire family went back to China. Went back to China for a number of years before Pearl Harbor coming home. Is that right, Randall? And his uncle was the one that told him, I think you better get back to the States because of your citizenship and your naturalization. You don't want to lose your status. So prior to 1941, after going back to China for, was it over 6 years, Randall? 9 years in China. He forgot to speak English almost. He forgot to almost read and write. So when Randall came back, he told me that he had to relearn the 2nd and 3rd and 4th grade to reread, learn his ABCs, right? Because he had no one to talk to in China. So by the time he came back, he worked at a one of your uncle's stores, is that correct? On Grant Avenue, is that right? WWII. Do you guys remember? WWII store. So Randall was not old enough to go into the military yet, and then was finally inducted. And here's the story I really have to be telling you about. Because I asked him, I said, how the heck did you get into the Rangers? He was a small dude, and most of the Rangers are, pretty big guys, whatever, okay? So he said, well, I didn't even know what the Rangers were. I was thinking about the Lone Ranger. And I was thinking about joining a mounted unit. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And so when the sergeant saw him, he goes, oh, well, why should I take you? He said, give me your rifle, and I'll show you. Popped the 8-round clip into an M1 rifle, shot 7 bullseyes out of 8. And then the sergeant goes, yeah, I think we can use you. So from that point on, Randall was pretty well beloved in his unit, and he made friends with also a sergeant that basically watched out for him. And a real funny point was when they were training at Camp Forest, Tennessee, the Rangers, if you saw pictures, you know what a telephone pole is, right? How big and how large the telephone pole is. These men are carrying the telephone pole, running, doing physical exercises with the telephone pole. Only Randall was not tall enough to hit the ground with it. So the guy just said, get on. So he hung on to the telephone pole all the way while the guys carried him like this. So he told me some pretty funny stories, okay? And it was pretty incredible to see how beloved he was, because Randall was one of 6,000, the only one Chinese American, Asian American in the Rangers in World War II. There are no other Asian Americans in the Rangers, no African Americans in the Rangers. So obviously going to combat, hitting the beach on June 6, 1944 that morning, first wave, Omaha Beach. You guys seen the film Saving Private Ryan? You guys saw how intense that was, right? Well, it's not quite that way, because when they landed in Omaha, they actually had about 3/4 a mile to go to inland. So you had to wade in the open area on the beach. And so their unit, as well as other units, had to reach the cover, where the cliffs were, basically, to get cover. But the one thing that saved his unit, because they were coming in as part of the second team to reinforce the Point Du Hoc attack, which was where the 2nd Ranger Battalion went in first. The 5th was held behind, and they had a radio to say, call us in when you're ready. Well, these guys were out in the water, turning, and they were like, we're not getting any calls. Well, the Rangers' equipment's all failed. There was no radio call. So finally, their commanding officer said, darn it, let's go. And they went into the beach, and they started seeing the carnage, the bodies, the landing craft that were hit by the Germans. And finally, he had the right sense to say, move to the left, go to the left. And that probably saved their entire unit. And from that point on, as a Ranger that day, they had to fight inland all the way into France, all the way through Belgium, and they went all the way to the end of the war in May 1945. And this one thing that Randall told me was, they never stopped for replacements. They never stopped. The Rangers kept going. And if a guy was killed on the line, a replacement would be brought back up. So it was pretty intense. And in all my years reading the reports from Chinese Americans, reading commendation papers, reading all their personal papers, I had never come upon an infantryman with this type of statement on his award. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it said that Private First Class Randall Ching single-handedly destroyed an entire German platoon, annihilated them with a knife. And if that kind of tells you the type of fighting that he had to go through and to endure and to survive, I have to say, I'm shaking right now just to try to think of that. I don't know how this 5'4" Ranger did it, but he really kicked some butt. And he did his duty. He really did. And so for 9 decades, Randall's story was very, very dormant, very quiet. And until we really met and got together with the family, it's a very defining moment that Randall would come out and share his story for the first time and be part of our Chinese American veterans heritage, especially with the Congressional Gold Medal. So to you, sir, I salute you. Thank you, Randall. I want to cry.
That was very moving.
I'm one of Randall's children, and all that's happened through the war, he's never told any one of us until later on when we're in our 40s. But I got to tell you, on top of everything else, he's a terrific dad. He raised 4 children on a very small income. He had to go to school, engineering school. And I asked him if he ever had any post-traumatic distress syndrome afterwards, and he said, sure, but you have to go on with life. I had 5 mouths to feed, and I just picked myself up, and I just did what I had to do. And that's the way it is with a lot of the soldiers. So I just want to say, thanks, Dad, and you got to remember one thing, he's a wonderful, wonderful father. And I think he raised 4 crazy children who care about him tremendously, and son-in-laws and daughter-in-laws and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So you need to see the other side of him. He's a wonderful person. That's it, Daddy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was such a moving tribute. Thank you so much for sharing that here today. I really appreciate it, both of you. And thank you for being with us today, Randall Ching, Mr. Ching. Thank you. So in closing, there's not much more I can say except thank you to everyone who's been here. Thank you to everyone who's made this day possible. I mentioned our sponsors before. I thanked Connie Young Yu, Al Young for being here, their families. Coming from Seattle, we had Ed Gore coming in from Texas. We had Major General Bill Chen coming in from Massachusetts. Thank you. Monty from Southern California. People coming from near and far to be here. It was very historic. It was very important. And I think these kinds of gatherings really need to happen so that we can collectively remember and do good with this. So as you've had many calls to action today, I think the biggest call to action is let's remember, let's share, let's connect, let's make sure that everyone's service, current day service, and past service is recognized and honored. So thank you for letting Chinese Historical Society of America be part of this journey. Thank you so much. Oh, and I'm sorry, my staff is reminding me that we do have surveys on the tables. We have funding from Cal Humanities, and it's very important to our funders to know if these programs have impact, if they've been meaningful for you, if you will share them, if you will let people know that these kinds of things are important and will take those forward into the future. I wanted to recognize Cathay Post again for being here, providing the colors this morning. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. And of course, VFW, Commander Raymond Wong was joining us today. Thank you very much. And you know what, we were really honored. Yesterday, in the audience was one of the nephews of one of our founders, C.H. Kwok, who passed away recently. And so I think this just speaks to the fact that we're losing our people, unfortunately, and we're losing our connections to the past every day. And so just again, connect with each other, do good work, be good people. Like you say, these things, my father just passed in December. And you know, I'm thankful I had him for this long, but there's many questions I wish I had asked him. And so I think that we all know we have work to do. Please go out and do it. Please write down your own stories. Please share. Thank you so much. My staff also reminds me that the museum is open today until 4 o'clock. We do have many artifacts on display, including some from our accountant, Waylon Liu, who spoke yesterday. So I hope you will make the trek up to 965 Clay Street. It's just above Stockton, between Stockton and Powell. We're open there today till 4. We're open Wednesday through Sundays, 11 to 4. So join us there at Chinese Historical Society of America. Thank you so much.